During the production of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, the tension between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford reached a boiling point. There were reports of Bette Davis kicking Joan Crawford in one scene with more force than the script required. Crawford, in retaliation, supposedly filled her pockets with weights so that Davis would strain herself trying to move her in a scene where Davis had to drag her across the floor. Gossip columnists wrote about every eye roll and every cutting remark, and the film's publicity thrived on the rumors of their intense hatred. Both actresses publicly denied letting personal feelings affect their work. However, behind the scenes, they launched snide comments at each other. Davis once said, "She has slept with every male star at MGM except Lassie," implying Crawford's promiscuity. Crawford fired back with her own barbs, calling Davis a phony and insisting that Davis was just acting whenever she was nice to someone. Their feud continued in the public eye for decades. Even after Crawford passed away in 1977, Davis was not entirely kind. She is famously quoted as saying, "You should never say bad things about the dead, only good." Joan Crawford is dead. Good. While some dispute the accuracy of that exact phrasing, it captures the enduring bitterness. Their feud allegedly started in the 1930s, when Bette Davis found out that Joan Crawford had taken an interest in a man Davis liked. While it sounds like a romantic spat, there was more to it than just personal issues. They were both strong personalities, vying for top billing at major studios. By the time they starred together in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, their dislike for each other was legendary. It was not the only rivalry. There were many more actors who were sworn enemies to each other. 2. Debbie Reynolds versus Elizabeth Taylor. Debbie Reynolds and Elizabeth Taylor were once close friends who shared a bond fostered by the studio system. Debbie was bright, bubbly, and wholesome, known for musicals like Singin' in the Rain. Elizabeth Taylor was seen as one of the most stunning beauties in Hollywood. Their friendship took a harsh turn when Elizabeth Taylor became involved with Debbie's husband, singer Eddie Fisher. Soon after, Fisher left Debbie for Elizabeth, setting off a massive scandal. Hollywood and the press were consumed with stories of how America's sweetheart was betrayed by her friend. Elizabeth Taylor, who had just lost her husband Mike Todd in a plane crash, found comfort in Eddie Fisher's support. Debbie was left heartbroken and humiliated. Fans of both actresses took sides, with many sympathizing with Debbie. Others believed Elizabeth's grief made her vulnerable and not entirely responsible for the affair. It was a personal feud that quickly went public. Reporters hounded both stars for comment. Debbie, known for her congeniality, tried her best to maintain a dignified silence for the sake of her children. Elizabeth, on the other hand, faced a wave of negative press and had to defend her actions. Their studios also tried to manage the fallout, worried that the scandal might harm their box office appeal. Years later, Debbie and Elizabeth reconciled. In fact, they ended up working out their differences and reportedly spoke kindly of each other after the dust had settled. They even starred together in the film These Old Broads, written by Carrie Fisher, Debbie's daughter. It became a testament to the fact that time can heal old wounds, even in Hollywood. 3. Frank Sinatra versus Marlon Brando. In the mid-1950s, Frank Sinatra was already a huge singing sensation, nicknamed The Voice. Marlon Brando was the rising star of method acting, lauded for his raw and realistic performances in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. When both were cast in Guys and Dolls, trouble started. Sinatra wanted the leading role of Sky Masterson, but Brando, with limited singing ability, got the part instead. Sinatra was relegated to playing Nathan Detroit. Tension during the filming was evident. Sinatra complained that Brando was not a real singer and that he had earned the role purely on star power. Brando's approach to acting, taking multiple takes and searching for emotional truth, clashed with Sinatra's quick, one or two takes style. One popular story suggests that Sinatra called Brando mumbles because Brando's speech was sometimes hard to understand, while Brando teased Sinatra for his short temper on set. Their rivalry was mostly contained to guys and dolls, but neither man had much respect for the other. Sinatra, who prided himself on his musical talent, saw Brando's casting as an insult. Brando, known to be aloof, reportedly found Sinatra's impatience exasperating. Both men had big egos, and neither wanted to back down. After Guys and Dolls, they did not work together again, and their paths in Hollywood rarely crossed in a meaningful way. Over time, both went on to enjoy continued success in their fields. Brando became an icon of modern acting, and Sinatra remained one of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century. Their rivalry simply faded as they focused on their own careers. 4. Joan Fontaine vs. Olivia de Havilland sisters. Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland had a rivalry that reportedly started in childhood. Growing up, both had aspirations to act, and Olivia found success first with roles like Melanie in Gone with the Wind. Joan, feeling overshadowed, changed her last name to Fontaine to create her own identity. The rivalry became obvious when they were both nominated for an Oscar in 1942. Olivia for Hold Back the Dawn, and Joan for Suspicion. Joan won, and some accounts say Olivia refused to congratulate her. Joan hinted that her sister never liked her from the start. Their mother also played a part, supposedly favoring Olivia. Over the years, they publicly made snarky comments and avoided each other at industry events. The animosity was real enough that even those close to them admitted the sisters could barely stand to be in the same room. For instance, gossip columnist Hedda Hopper once wrote that she found it sad that two talented sisters could be so cold toward one another. They carried their feud throughout most of their adult lives, offering only minimal polite contact. Their rivalry lasted until Joan Fontaine's death in 2013. Though there were rumors of partial reconciliations, Olivia de Havilland indicated that she had tried to mend fences but never fully succeeded. To the public, they remained a symbol of how sibling rivalry, when combined with professional competition, can become painfully unbreakable. 5. Bette Davis vs. Tallulah Bankhead. Bette Davis appeared more than once on this list because of her strong will and sharp tongue. Tallulah Bankhead was similarly famed for her wit and flamboyant personality. Their rivalry reportedly came to a head when rumors started that Davis's character in All About Eve was based on Bankhead's mannerisms. Bankhead, known for her theatrical style, was offended by the suggestion. Tallulah Bankhead allegedly complained to friend that Davis had stolen her look and her way of speaking to create the memorable character Margot Channing. Davis, of course, denied basing Margot on anyone in particular. The media picked up on this possible inspiration, and gossip columns ran with the idea. Bankhead, furious at being treated like a blueprint rather than a star in her own right, lashed out. Bette Davis was not one to back down. She maintained that the script was written by Joseph L. Mankiewicz and that she simply acted the role as directed. Bankhead, however, could not let it go and criticized Davis's performance as too theatrical. Davis responded that Tallulah should worry more about her own work than mine. It was a brief but fiery standoff. Over time, the feud died down as both stars moved on to other projects. Bankhead continued her theater work, and Davis remained a force in Hollywood. Publicly, the two never became friends, but they also did not continue exchanging harsh words. The rivalry simply fizzled out, leaving behind rumors and speculation about whether Margot Channing was indeed Tallulah Bankhead in disguise. 6. Laurence Olivier versus Marilyn Monroe. When Laurence Olivier, one of Britain's greatest stage actors, decided to direct and star in The Prince and the Showgirl, he cast Marilyn Monroe as his co-star. Monroe was riding high on her popularity and was taking lessons from the actor's studio in New York, fully embracing method acting. Olivier, trained in the classical stage tradition, found Monroe's approach maddening. On set, Marilyn was often late, insisting she needed time to find her character. Olivier, who liked punctuality and a precise style, became increasingly frustrated. At one point, he is said to have shouted, "Try and be sexy," in exasperation, while Marilyn sought deeper motivations for her character. The clash was not just a difference of acting style, but of temperament as well. Both had huge reputations. Monroe felt undervalued, believing Olivier treated her like a dumb blonde rather than a serious actress. Olivier thought Monroe was unprofessional and unprepared. Their disagreements became so stressful that Monroe's then-husband, playwright Arthur Miller, came to set to defend her. Crew members later recalled that while tension was high, it mostly stayed confined to disagreements over their craft. The Prince and the Showgirl received mixed reviews, although Monroe was praised for her performance. Olivier later spoke more kindly of Monroe, acknowledging her magnetism. However, during filming, the two never truly saw eye to eye. Once production wrapped, their paths rarely crossed again, and the rivalry dissipated into a distant memory of two strong personalities clashing on set. 7. Frank Sinatra vs. Shelley Winters. Frank Sinatra makes another appearance here, this time clashing with actress Shelley Winters on the set of Meet Danny Wilson. The exact reason for their dispute is unclear, but rumors suggest it started over Sinatra's mood swings and Winters' strong opinions on set. The famous story goes that Sinatra and Winters got into a physical confrontation during filming. Shelley Winters, not one to be easily intimidated, supposedly argued back whenever Sinatra lashed out. Both had fiery personalities, and the tension escalated quickly. While they finished the movie without major production delays, everyone on set felt the tension. Winters later recalled that Sinatra was dealing with personal and career pressures at the time. He was in a difficult period professionally before his comeback in From Here to Eternity. She implied that he was taking out his frustrations on everyone around him, and she refused to back down. After the film, they did not work together again. Both went on to have successful careers, with Sinatra's star rising significantly in music and movies, and Winters becoming a respected actress with multiple Oscar nominations. Their feud seems to have been temporary, confined mostly to that one set, though they never became close friends afterward. 8. Sir John Gielgud versus Ingrid Bergman. Sir John Gielgud was known for his impeccable stage presence and classical training. Ingrid Bergman was a Swedish star admired for her natural beauty and emotional sincerity on screen. Their paths crossed in theatrical circles and during social events. At some point, Gielgud reportedly made critical comments about Bergman's acting, calling it lacking subtlety. Word got back to Bergman that Gielgud found her performances too simplistic. Bergman, who had already won an Oscar and was beloved by audiences, felt insulted. She mentioned in private conversations that Gielgud was a snob who did not understand film acting. Gielgud, upon hearing her reaction, supposedly doubled down, saying that Bergman relied on her face rather than her craft. Though their feud never erupted into public shouting matches, It was a quiet, simmering disagreement. Industry insiders whispered about it, and a few actors were asked to weigh in. Some defended Bergman, saying her luminous screen presence was a gift. Others supported Gielgud, claiming that stage-trained actors had a more refined technique. Over time, both remained respected figures in their spheres. Gielgud stayed true to his stage roots, though he also took on film roles. Bergman continued to enjoy a stellar film career. They rarely worked together, and their personal interaction was minimal. The feud ended more by neglect than by resolution, fading into the background as both focused on other projects. 9. B. Arthur vs. Betty White. Moving into a slightly later period, B. Arthur and Betty White became household names in the Golden Girls. Betty White was known for her bubbly, positive attitude, while B. Arthur had a more sardonic style. According to co-stars, Arthur sometimes found White's eternal optimism grating. On set, Betty White would chat enthusiastically with the crew and audiences, which B. Arthur, a more private person, did not always appreciate. White stated in interviews that Arthur would sometimes give her cold shoulder. Although they remained professional and delivered outstanding comedic performances, the personal warmth between them was lacking. It was not an all-out feud with yelling or threats, but it was a clear undercurrent of tension. Rue McClanahan, another co-star, once said that B was not fond of Betty's habit of talking about everyone and everything so openly. Betty, in turn, claimed she never understood why B resented her cheerfulness. The show remained a success, and they continued to work together until its conclusion. After the series ended, they rarely spent time together. Betty White sometimes expressed sadness that B. Arthur never seemed to fully embrace her friendship. When B. Arthur died in 2009, Betty White spoke kindly of her, showing no lingering bitterness. 10th, Walter Matthau vs. Barbra Streisand. In the filming of Hello, Dolly, Walter Matthau was cast as Horace Vandergelder, and Barbra Streisand took on the iconic role of Dolly Levi. Streisand was already famous for her strong personality, strong voice, and high standards. Matthau, known for his gruff demeanor and comedic timing, clashed with Streisand's need for creative control. Reports from the set indicate Matthau grew weary of Streisand's repeated takes, which she demanded for perfection. He complained that she was trying to run the show, stepping on the director's toes. Barbra, however, insisted that the best results came from pushing for excellence. Matthau's frustration was evident, and he sometimes hurled insults, telling her that she was a rising young megalomaniac. The tension was palpable. Crew members recalled that the two hardly spoke off-camera. Matthau was a seasoned actor who did not enjoy being challenged, while Streisand was a newly minted star who believed in absolute dedication to her vision. The film itself went on to become famous for its production numbers and Streisand's performance. But behind the scenes, the bitterness was tough to miss. After the film, they did not work together again. Both went on to have successful careers. Streisand built a legendary career in music and film. Matthau continued to star in successful comedies. They never publicly reconciled, but they also did not continue exchanging barbs in the press. Their rivalry remains one of the cautionary tales about big egos colliding on set. 11. Joan Crawford vs. Norma Shearer. Joan Crawford and Norma Shearer both rose to prominence at MGM during the 1930s. Shearer was married to the powerful producer Irving Thalberg, which many believed gave her first pick of the best roles. Crawford, ambitious and determined, resented what she saw as favoritism. Crawford allegedly tried to sabotage Shearer on multiple occasions. One story claims that Crawford lobbied for roles that Shearer was set to star in, including the plum part in The Women. While Shearer ended up in that film, Crawford's behind-the-scenes maneuvers created bad blood. Crawford once famously said, "How can I compete with Norma? She sleeps with the boss," referring to Thalberg. Their rivalry was intense, fueled by jealousy and ambition. Crawford felt she had to fight for her success, while Shearer was handed everything on a silver platter. This attitude led to a deep sense of competition. MGM executives were well aware of this tension, but often used it to generate publicity. Eventually, Shearer began to appear in fewer films, especially after Thalberg's death. Crawford left MGM for Warner Brothers, where she revitalized her career, overshadowing Shearer by the 1940s. They never made peace publicly, but time and changing career paths cooled animosity. 12th, Katharine Hepburn versus Bette Davis. Katharine Hepburn and Bette Davis were two of the most celebrated actresses of the Golden Age, each with multiple Oscar nominations. Hepburn was associated primarily with RKO and later MGM, while Davis was a stalwart at Warner Brothers. Their rivalry was rooted in awards, critical acclaim, and a desire to be seen as the top dramatic actress. Davis once criticized Hepburn's acting style, saying she was a personality, not an actress. Hepburn, known for her refined New England manners, publicly shrugged off the comment. However, behind closed doors, she was said to have told friends that Davis was overacting in many of her roles. Both women had strong opinions about acting. Davis approached her roles with a fiery intensity, while Hepburn brought a certain patrician grace. They rarely worked together, so their feud was based more on public perception and indirect jabs. Fans and critics compared them constantly, often debating who was the better actress. In later years, both acknowledged each other's talent in polite terms. Hepburn reportedly admired Davis's commitment, and Davis recognized Hepburn's ability to transform in comedic and dramatic roles. They were not friends, but the rivalry never became a venomous feud. It mostly existed in the press and in their occasional digs at each other's acting methods. 13. Clark Gable versus Spencer. Tracy Clark Gable, often called the King of Hollywood, and Spencer Tracy, revered for his natural acting style, were both under contract at MGM. They co-starred in San Francisco and Boomtown. Gable had star power and swagger, while Tracy won critical acclaim and 2 Oscars during the 1930s. Gable feared being upstaged by Tracy's acting prowess. Gable reportedly insisted on script changes to ensure he had more lines or more prominent scenes. Tracy, who cared less about fame and more about the quality of his performance, found Gable's demands petty. After filming San Francisco, rumors circulated that Gable felt overshadowed by Tracy's subtle but powerful acting. It was a muted rivalry. Both were popular with audiences, but Gable was more open about wanting to be top dog. Tracy's main focus was on quality films and a steady approach. Studio heads, eager to keep both stars happy, often balanced out their roles. While not as personal or nasty as some feuds, the competition was genuine. They went their separate ways, each enjoying successful careers. Tracy later formed an iconic screen partnership with Katharine Hepburn, while Gable became immortalized by Gone with the Wind. Their rivalry was never officially resolved or dramatically concluded. It simply waned as they worked on different projects. 14. Humphrey Bogart vs. George Raft. Humphrey Bogart and George Raft were both known for gangster and tough guy roles. Early in his career, Raft turned down several scripts, including High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon. Bogart took these roles instead and shot to stardom. Raft came to regret these decisions and reportedly harbored resentment toward Bogart's success. Raft attempted to sway studio heads from casting Bogart in certain roles, fearing Bogart would further eclipse him. Bogart, aware of Raft's meddling, held a grudge. While they never came to physical blows, they had heated arguments about who deserved which parts. It was a professional rivalry, more about missed opportunities than personal hatred. Raft's regret turned into quiet bitterness. Bogart, who had struggled for years to break out, was determined to hold on to his newfound stardom. Eventually, Bogart's career soared with classics like Casablanca and The Big Sleep. Raft never regained his previous status. Over time, Raft's bitterness faded into resignation. The rivalry ended as Bogart's iconic status grew, while Raft's standing in Hollywood declined. 15. Vivien Leigh vs. Laurence Olivier. Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier had a complex relationship. They were married and considered one of the golden couples of stage and screen. Yet their personal and professional lives were intertwined with an undercurrent of rivalry. Leigh was catapulted to fame with Gone with the Wind, and Olivier was England's crown jewel of the stage. They often supported each other, but tension grew as Leigh's mental health issues impacted her work. During productions like Antony and Cleopatra, both were determined to shine. Leigh's struggle with bipolar disorder sometimes caused erratic behavior and missed rehearsals. Olivier's patience wore thin, and he criticized her in front of cast members. Leigh, in turn, felt overshadowed by Olivier's reputation as the greatest actor in the English-speaking world. Their rivalry was overshadowed by their love story, but it was still fierce in moments when they both vied for critical acclaim. They each wanted to be the best in their field. People close to them said they were a perfect match in passion, but incompatible when it came to balancing each other's ambitions. They eventually divorced in 1960. Leigh continued to work, but struggled with her health until her death in 1967. Olivier remarried and remained a towering figure in theater and film. The tension between them eased once they ended their marriage, but they never completely reconciled their personal and professional conflicts. 16th Orson Welles, Sir William Randolph Hearst. Though William Randolph Hearst was not an actor, his conflict with Orson Welles belongs in the pantheon of Hollywood rivalries because it had a profound impact on Welles's career. Hearst, a powerful newspaper magnate, saw Welles's film Citizen Kane as a personal attack, given that the fictional Charles Foster Kane bore a strong resemblance to Hearst. Hearst used his newspapers to smear Welles and orchestrated boycotts. He even pressured theaters not to show Citizen Kane. Welles, who was only in his mid-20s, found himself battling a media titan with enormous influence. RKO, the studio behind Citizen Kane, was caught in the crossfire and nearly shelved the film. Hearst's campaign against Welles was ruthless. Welles later said it nearly destroyed his career. Hearst's newspapers ran negative stories about Welles's personal life and even suggested he was a threat to American values. The young director was outmatched in terms of power and resources, though he stood his ground. Citizen Kane was eventually released, but it did poorly at the box office due to the restricted distribution. Over time, critics hailed it as one of the greatest films ever made. Hearst never relented in his dislike for Welles, but as the decades passed, the story of their rivalry became Hollywood legend. Welles, though he faced many challenges, outlived Hearst's direct influence, and Citizen Kane gained its rightful place in film history. 17th, Bing Crosby vs. Bob Hope. Bing Crosby and Bob Hope were frequent co-stars in the popular Road to Meade series of comedic films. Their rivalry was more light-hearted than hostile. Each was a witty, charming entertainer, and they built their comedic personas around trading jokes and banter. Privately, however, there was some real competition regarding box office draws and fan popularity. On set, both men tried to steal the best punchlines. Hope, known for his quick ad-libs, sometimes went off script, leaving Crosby feeling overshadowed. Crosby, beloved for his smooth singing voice, teased Hope about never winning an Oscar. Hope would retort by pointing out Crosby's comedic limitations compared to his own. Mostly, it stayed in the realm of friendly competition. Studio publicists often played it up, encouraging them to pretend to dislike each other's methods. They saw that this rivalry sold tickets because audiences loved playful jabs. They remained friends for decades and continued to make films together. While there was always a spark of competition, it never became a destructive feud. Their on-screen chemistry endured, and fans remember them fondly for their comedic partnership, rather than any real animosity. 18. Marlene Dietrich vs. Tallulah Bankhead. Both Marlene Dietrich and Tallulah Bankhead were strong-willed, unconventional women. They each had a reputation for being sexually liberated, openly flirting with both men and women. Some rumors suggested that the two had been romantically involved, which either deepened their bond or set them on a collision course, depending on who told the story. Bankhead allegedly spread gossip about Dietrich's affairs, perhaps out of jealousy. Dietrich, in turn, dismissively referred to Bankhead as that loud American. Friends who knew them insisted they had a brief fling that ended poorly, which fueled their personal rivalry. When asked about each other, both actresses would roll their eyes or make snide remarks. Bankhead once proclaimed that Dietrich was a one-trick pony, implying her glamour was all she had. Dietrich reportedly shot back, calling Bankhead's stage presence too crass for refined audiences. They eventually moved in different circles. Dietrich continued her film career and cabaret acts, while Bankhead stuck to the stage and occasional radio or film appearances. Their rivalry was never formally resolved. It remained a simmering dislike, based on personal grievances and a clash of larger-than-life egos. 19th, James Cagney versus Edward G. Robinson. James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson were both iconic gangster stars of the 1930s. Cagney was known for his fast-talking, streetwise characters, while Robinson played more cerebral, menacing mob bosses. Both were Warner Brothers mainstays, and fans liked to compare them as rival gangster personas. While there was respect between the two, the studio system often pitted them against each other for top billing and key gangster roles. Cagney once mentioned in an interview that Robinson could intimidate you with a single stare, which he found both admirable and slightly irritating. Robinson, for his part, thought Cagney overplayed the tough guy act. They were not best friends, but they did not have an open feud either. It was a professional rivalry, mainly driven by the studio's promotional tactics. Both men competed for prime scripts. The press often asked them to comment on each other's performances, and they gave guarded praise, underscoring the i.e. tension. Both had lasting careers, eventually moving beyond gangster roles. The rivalry cooled as each found different genres to explore. While never close pals, they coexisted peacefully within the Warner Brothers stable. And as the gangster craze subsided, so did their competition. 20th, Rex Harrison vs. Charlton Heston. Rex Harrison, the sophisticated English actor, and Charlton Heston, known for his rugged, heroic roles, did not have much in common in terms of screen image. Their feud reportedly began when Heston criticized Harrison's behavior on set, calling him difficult and insufferable. Harrison had a reputation for being fussy, demanding, and sometimes belittling toward crew members. Heston, who prided himself on professionalism, found Harrison's conduct appalling. Word got back to Harrison, and he shot back that Heston was a dull leading man, who lacked nuance. They were not frequently on the same project, so their animosity existed mostly through public remarks. Heston was quoted as saying, "Rex Harrison is the most insufferable man I ever worked with," though the details of when they shared a set are murky. The rivalry was more about character judgments than direct competition for roles. Both men continued successful careers, rarely overlapping. Over time, the feud simply died out, with each focusing on new projects. Harrison became synonymous with roles like Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady, while Heston remained identified with epic performances like Ben-Hur and The Ten Commandments. 21st, Barbara Stanwyck vs. Joan Crawford. Barbara Stanwyck was lauded for her no-nonsense style and her ability to play tough, independent women. Joan Crawford, equally ambitious, had a long-standing rivalry with many actresses. While Crawford respected Stanwyck's talent, both competed for similar strong female roles in the 1930s and 1940s. One of the most talked-about incidents involved the film Mildred Pierce. Stanwyck was offered the lead role, but turned it down for reasons not entirely clear. Some say scheduling conflicts. Others say she didn't connect with the character. Crawford took the role and won an Oscar, rejuvenating her career. Stanwyck later remarked that Joan made the most of that part. I probably would have approached it differently. While they did not publicly sling insults, there was underlying tension. Crawford and Stanwyck both wanted top billing and the best scripts. Studio heads often played them off each other, using rumors about one being in talks for a role to pressure the other into signing contracts more quickly. Their rivalry never exploded in the tabloids, but neither did they become close friends. Over the years, both acknowledged each other's talents. Crawford's career waned after the 1950s, while Stanwyck found success in television. They never publicly reconciled, but they also did not exchange hostile words later in life.